Good morning, everybody, and well done for making the early morning session today. We will hear today the topic of leveraging translation technology to close the multilingual gap, a topic that is very relevant for many global companies right now. I was very pleased to be asked to host this session because I was going to be here anyway listening to the talk. Let me start introducing you to Maribel Rodriguez. Maribel has been on the Dublin localization scene for more than 20 years. It's absolutely beyond me how we have never crossed paths. We even discovered today that we worked in the same team. In our defense, not at the same time. So Maribel has honed the craft and also contributed to the craft of QA automation. She now works as the machine translation quality manager at Language.io. And Tommaso Rossi started his career as a translator and interpreter, and is passionate about multilingual language strategy. Yeah. He spent more than 10 years at Expedia, growing his career there, and he's now the head of localization. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to your talk. Thank you. And we will take questions at the end. Thank you.
Thank you, Julia.
Thank you, Julia.
Can you hear me okay? Good. All right. So we are here today to talk about, a lot of the sessions that we heard during this week are about efficiency, AI, edit distance, and strategies and processes. In Expedia, being a localization team means also providing localization solutions for everything that the company might have. So one of the things that became a challenge at one point for Expedia is contact center support, multilingual contact center support. So Expedia is a global travel agency. Everybody knows it more or less. When somebody thinks about travel agencies, they say, oh, great, hotels. Yes, hotels, but a bit more. So Expedia is hotels and lodging, but also apartment, vacation rental, cruise ship, cars, and so on and so forth. But we have a very large range of services that can be combined and bundled together. Now, when it goes into all these services, it's very complex for a company like Expedia to provide contact center support and customer and partner support across the globe. We have a very, very large range of markets, of languages, and of customer and partners. Now, when we talk about this contact center support, we have a lot of challenges. So we try to group them into three main categories. First of all is availability. We need to make sure that our contact center and customer support is always available 24/7 in all languages. Second is flexibility and resiliency, making sure that no matter what the season is, we always provide the right support for the partner and the customer. You can imagine that support is very, very high in demand in summer or during winter, and it's a little bit lower in demand during the other seasons. And we need to make sure that our contact centers locations are always staffed and they are scalable to provide the right support to the customer and the partner. And then eventually, we also care a lot about customer experience. And we want to make sure that the traveler is very happy in working with us and that the partner is happy in providing their services through our platform. So when we go into customer support and partner support, we used to have the two basic channels, email and phone. They are very easy. They need native speakers, and depending on the demand, they provide the support across the globe. Now, the problem is the three challenges I mentioned before through these two channels are extremely complex to set up and at the same time extremely expensive. So at Expedia, we needed to find a scalable and cost-effective solution. And that's when chat came in. So chat plus machine translation is a combination of technology solutions that can provide the flexibility that we require from a coverage 24/7. Because thanks to the fact of making chat universally usable through any type of agents, we were able to cover 24/7. At the same time, we can leverage different centers and different locations depending on the volume spikes. And that makes it extremely flexible, and it addressed our resiliency challenge. And then because of all this availability and all this resiliency, the customer and the partner are much happier in working with us and in asking support. And as I mentioned earlier, we need a cost-effective and accessible solution. So the chat and plus machine translation was in theory at the beginning a good idea, and that's when we look for a partner to help us doing it, because we could have easily said, okay, I have my chat tool and I can plug machine translation in it, and it can work really, really well. But the problem is we need to build our experience, we need to build our knowledge, and most importantly, we need to work with somebody who is extremely professional and knowledgeable in the area in order to help us address these challenges and find the perfect solution for us. And that's when Language.io came in.
Thank you, Tommaso. So at Language.io, our software allows monolingual customer support agents to be able to chat, email, and provide self-service support in up to 150 languages in real time. So with our machine translation technology, we can get organizations such as Expedia up and running with accurate and secure translations in a very short turnaround. For Expedia, we have our solution integrated throughout many different channels: Salesforce Chat, Salesforce Case, through our plugin, and also via API through Expedia's own virtual agent platform. With our technology, as Tommaso was saying earlier on, we're not only supporting Expedia's travelers, but also supporting Expedia's partners. Our technology is very easy to use. For example, a German traveler will see the entire conversation, their messages and their answers from the agent completely in German. While, for example, if we had a Spanish-speaking agent, they will be able to see the entire conversation in Spanish, or they will be able to also see the German questions from the traveler alongside the Spanish translation. For language combinations without English, like, for example, German into Spanish and back and forward, right? We do not need to pivot via English, which makes our translations more fluent.
And the interesting part is what Maribel said, the language combination is key in this kind of technology, because you can find a German traveler that needs to talk to an agent who is actually Chinese native speaker. So the combination of the languages needs to flow. And I personally went into several contact centers around the world, shadowing agents in order to see how they chat to traveler and partner, and the conversation is flowing incredibly well, and which is quite impressive, and that convinced that this is probably the solution we wanted to try. So when we looked at the support that we had, that we said before, in Expedia we have the traveler support and the partner support. There are two very different things. It's that there is a difference in tone, a difference in relationship, and difference in the service that we want to provide. Now, the difference is also that the traveler is a customer support service that is really big. We have almost 20,000 agents around the world working around the clock, and as you can imagine, it is almost basically outsourced because we can't have 20,000 agents in-house. It gets a little bit expensive. And we cover a lot of markets, even beyond the point of sales that we have in Expedia, because, of course, being a global company, no matter where the traveler is, if they purchase a service for Expedia and they need support, they want to speak their own language. On the other hand, the partner side is a little bit more complex from a tone and formality point of view, but it is a bit smaller because we have fewer partners than travelers in the business, and because of that, we also have a different infrastructure in Expedia. We have an outsourced CRM, an outsourced platform. It's not a built-in solution, and we have a smaller number of markets and a smaller number of languages, because, of course, the language support required is matching more or less the markets and the point of sales that we support and we sell into. So in view of this, and because this was a new solution, we thought maybe it's better to start small, to take baby steps and try to understand how to deploy this solution that combine these two technologies, chat and machine translation, on a smaller scale. We went to the partner support. Now, it's it's complex. I don't know if you love chat. I don't, for example. And when I go into support, I prefer picking up the phone. So there was a lot of work that needed to be done on our side to advertise the channel and make sure that our partners, our B2B segment of the business, is somehow prepared and trained on how to use it. And what did we do? To launch this proof of concept, we selected, first of all, we run through our security checks in order to make sure that everything is secure, that we have a very, very high-level privacy and security policy, and we need to make sure that this new technology was respecting the partner privacy when conversing with our agents. We picked a handful of languages, and we make sure that we train the agents to understand how to use this channel, because it's not always obvious. It's not exactly the same thing as talking on the phone. Again, it's a different set of skills. And most importantly, we started understanding what is going to make this point of a proof of concept successful. So we defined KPIs, and the KPIs for us were first of all, how happy the partner is in talking to us via chat. Second, the AHT, so how much time our agents are going to spend in every single conversation. We expect an increase. It's not going to be as fast as a phone conversation, but so we need to understand what kind of thresholds and metrics we wanted to use. And eventually, of course, and most importantly, the localization and translation quality. We can't have a conversation that flows if the two parties don't understand each other. And in that, of course, we partner with Language.io.
Thank you, Tommaso. So working with multilingual customer support content is really very tricky because both customers and agents, when they communicate with each other, they tend to use a very casual language, right? That tends to be a bit difficult for machine translation. So imagine an environment, right, for customer support content with this nearly impossible set of characteristics, right? So let's start by, grown source punctuation. Just a comma missing in the source, like in this example, right, can really change the meaning completely from thanks for waiting, Carla, to thanks for waiting for Carla. Just a simple example, right, but I think it's really illustrative of the challenge. Here we have another common example, and this really happens because of lack of context during chat, right, because you're just writing a sentence at the time many, many times. So for example, you're welcome as you're welcome to Lockwell, you're welcome to a place, many times gets mistranslated, right? Instead, when you're using it after someone says thank you, right, the meaning will be very different to you're welcome to a place in many different languages. Another characteristic of support content is that it's really full of abbreviations, acronyms, slang. For example, for Expedia, we did a lot of work trying to get all the airport code names, right, adapted as part of our domain adaptation, right? So something simple like MAD for Madrid airport code, MAD, right? In this example, the flight from Madrid, right, or from MAD, from MAD, gets translated as the flight of the crazy one, right? So this is really crazy. It's funny, right, but not really what we will be wanting to have in your situation. So here you can see another couple of examples, right? Like you have abbreviations for days of the weeks, for months, for regards, right? Many times the engines, unless you do a good domain adaptation, they leave the stuff untranslated or mistranslated, as we have seen, right? As I was saying, it's super important just to consider the domain and also the customer specific terminology, right? Sometimes you can also end up with other unexpected translations in this situation because of lack of context as well. So in this example, coach transfer, right, that's the coach transfer to a place, right, got mistranslated as a sports coach transfer, right, because of the lack of context. So it should have been traslado en autocar or en autobús, but no, it was the sports coach transfer. So that's not what we wanted either.
Nope.
it was good that we did a good work of finding all of these different examples and doing a good domain adaptation to get all this right for the traveling domain.
The partnership that we developed with Language.io was successful also for this. We found a partner that could really understand the challenges that we were going through. So first of all, in Expedia, we love acronyms. We put an acronym for everything. We have pages and pages of glossaries in our library to make sure that everybody's aware, and we bring new ones every time we can. And then at the same time, even if we selected a partner as the first proof of concept, the conversation is still very colloquial, and those kind of things happen every day. So we thought that eventually one day we will publish a book of funny mistakes for translation.
Yeah, I think we should definitely do that. Also, another aspect that is very tricky of this type of content, there are idiomatic sentences, right? For example, in Spanish Mexico, one very a standard idiom that everyone uses is de plano, and this means of course, right? But without domain adaptation, this will have been translated as they will have been translated as flat out instead of being translated as of course. That is what we will have wanted. So there's many other challenges in relation to customer support content. I mean, I have many examples, but I won't go through all of them, such as wrong syntax, typos in the source that could mean something completely different, right? Also, a lot of incomplete sentences because you have been having a thread of a conversation, right? So people think oh, they already know what I said before, but it's not always the case. So I used to work in more traditional log for many, many years, as Julia was saying before, but when I moved to working at Language.io, one of the things that really struck me was about how challenging it was going to be, right, to measure and monitor machine translation quality in this landscape of customer support, right? So imagine our landscape, right, where we have very fast-paced content, right? Sometimes chats can be just a couple of minutes, tickets can be really very short text that go back and forward, back and forward. We don't have time for having a human in the loop. We don't have time for a review, for post-editing. We don't have the luxury of a reference or gold standard translation to do reference-based automated metrics. Also, the content is bidirectional, right? It goes from one language to the other, back, forward, right? So it's a constant switch. And on top of that, right, imagine that we don't store any content because we have a strict no content trace policy, right? And we're ISO certified, we're GDPR compliant, so we don't have any content stored in our servers, right? So as you can imagine, it is not easy, right, to measure and monitor linguistic quality with all this set of complexities. So let me try to walk you through how we approach these challenges of producing translations for multilingual support content, and how do we measure. So the overall process starts with a request. Normally the request comes from an end customer, in the case of Expedia, from an end traveler, right? When that first request hits our servers, the first thing that we do is that we mask any personal identifiable information, any KPIs, anything like proper names, like account numbers, telephone numbers, etc., right? And this is very important because of our high security standards. And with that first interaction, we can already know, okay, what are the language pairs that are going to be at play, right? Because we know the bilanguage detection of the end traveler, and we know what's the language of the agent. So based on this information, then we know which are the glossaries that we need to use. And when we start working with organizations such as Expedia, we do a lot of work at the beginning, right, to prep for a glossary of key terms for chat and case, right? That could be very different maybe to the glossary that you normally have for NTP or other tasks that is both customer and domain specific. Another thing that we do from our side is that we know that terminology for our customers doesn't stay the same. It's always evolving all the time because there's new products, there's new features, the platforms changes. So we have this approach where we are able to identify term candidates that will be good to implement into our glossary into the future. So once we have this first interaction, then we select what are the engines to be used, right? So this is done based on our knowledge, right, about the customer, the content type, also about the language pair that is at play. And then we use active learning in order to be able to validate our hypothesis about what is the best engine for this situation, right? So with our active learning, what we're doing is we're measuring two different features, right? We're measuring these two features that come from the side of the human, right, from the agent and the traveler. And we are also measuring that with the translation quality score, right? I was saying before, like, we cannot use reference-based automated metrics, but we can use TQE in order to see the semantic similarity, right, between the source and the target. So let me explain maybe for a while what is this flag rate. So this flag feature is a really handy feature. It can be used by both agents and end customers. So whenever they see a translation that might not be entirely appropriate or difficult to understand, the end user can press an icon, right, and the agent can see a flag, right? So this is very useful for the agent because they know, oh, the end customer is struggling a bit with the translation, right? So they can try to refresh the last sentence, so maybe it's better understood by machine translation. They can double check with the end customer if they're understanding. In the worst case scenario, if this doesn't work, they can always send this conversation, this chat, through a ticket and get a rapid human translation just to get the situation sorted. But, most of our approach is to maximize as much as possible, right, the use of fully automated translation because we really don't have time in our cycle to send much content to rapid human translation. The other feature that we have is the retranslation feature, right, and that allows an agent, when they see some output that maybe doesn't seem right because maybe some content might be missing or they are not too sure about it, they can send the same translation to a second engine. This is or what we call our priority to or second most viable engine to get a second output. So with these two measures, right, the flag and the retranslation rate, right, also combined with their TQE, we can validate our hypothesis about the engine training, or we can see, okay, maybe there's something that needs adjustment. It could be a glossary term, or it could be something that we need to add, something in our system, right, needs to be tweaked.
Ian, sorry. What Maribel said is very important for Expedia. So, first of all, glossary auto-generation, it's something that flows and is a continuous process. So every time there is a chat conversation, Language.io in the background, they collect, they extract terminology, they ask us to validate it, and then they feed the glossary with it in order to, the machine translation gets always better. And then another thing is that we are lucky because the localization team has terminology they can share with Language.io to prepare the engine at the beginning, but at the same time we want to leverage their experience and a DQE to make sure that they target the right engine for the right language pair. What Maribel mentioned at the beginning is extremely important for Expedia. We do not want any content to be stored or saved anywhere, and there needs to be a complete deletion of the conversation right after, because the conversation in chat can include credit card numbers, contact information, PPI and PII information. We do not want anybody, nor on our side, to store it. So with Language.io, we found the possibility of deleting and making this content disappear right away after the chat is closed. And that's extremely important for us.
Thank you, Tommaso. So let me try to break down a bit more, right, about how we measure our quality, right? And we do this at different stages throughout the process, right? So when we start a pilot with a customer, we also do human evaluation or human annotation. So typically we do this using accuracy and fluency score, but in the case of Expedia, we use a usability rating based on a 4-point scale that has been specifically designed by Expedia for our use case together. During in production, on the fly, right, we keep track of those measurements I was telling you before, right? The ones that come from the human, such as the flag rate and the retranslation rate. And we also correlate this information against all translation quality estimation. And we see all this data on the fly. And regularly we do a deep dive right into this data, right? So we look into the trend lines of our flag rating or retranslation rate and the TQE, and we correlate these data points against Expedia's data points, right? Against the Net Promoter Score, the customer satisfaction score, against the follow-up rates. We also have regular meetings together with Expedia where we look into all of this data. We calibrate how we are doing our setup, if we need any adjustments, etc. One thing that is also important to know is that every division of Expedia look into their own data. So what they do is they look into the performance of native speakers agents that are supporting local teams. They also look into the trend lines of the performance of English-speaking agents that are supporting the English-speaking market. And they compare those two lines against the performance of support teams that use machine translation with Language I/O, right? And what we're trying to do is to check that the gap between all those three lines is as close as possible together, right? When we see that it's not as close as we would like, we just try to find out, okay, what's the reason for that? But they're normally surprisingly close for most situations. We also carry out a human evaluation as needed, but we do this based on triggers, right? If it's something that we think, or maybe we need to look deeper into, then we'll do a human evaluation based on this 4-point score. But normally there's not a need for this. It's just based on some triggers. So we always wanted to partner with Expedia because for us, we love to work with companies that are forward-thinking and that invest heavily on technology because it's easier for us to learn from one another in this type of environment. When we approach working with a new customer, we position ourselves as the experts, but for us it's super important to really understand what are the KPIs of our customers, what are the goals, what are their strategy, and how do we fit into that picture. We try not to limit ourselves to just provide a product or a new feature. We try to be more encompassing and try to provide a solution to a problem. We're really open, we're really transparent, and Thomas, I'm sure, can tell you more about this. But at the same time, we're friendly and approachable, and we really value honest feedback from our customers because that's what makes us get better, right, and grow in our roles. So another factor that is always important when choosing a partner, we know is pricing, right? We are flexible in our pricing. We have different options that scale with our customers so they can start with us quickly and grow as they grow their business.
Talking about partnership, I mean, this is very important for us. I have the chance, I'm lucky enough to have spent a fair amount of time running supply chain management in and outside localization. And I've always been extremely supportive and a great ambassador of the symbiotic mutualism, which is a concept that you can find in nature, two creatures that they basically live together and they support each other by making each other's lives easier. So now if you translate that into business, making sure that two companies, they get together and say, this is the scope, this is the goal, this is the target, this is what we're trying to achieve. And now together, we need to get there. If I win and they don't, we don't win, because eventually they will stop supporting me, and vice versa. If they make the service not accessible enough or not good enough, then I don't win, and then they lose a client, or eventually we need to close up the service. So we really need to work together. So I guess that building a partnership in this way means being extremely transparent, make sure that we always we don't hide anything from them. This is our scope. This is our service. Can you please help us with this? Give feedback. Give a lot of feedback, and make sure that they understand where they are shortcoming, when they are succeeding, when they are winning, and what are the things that we need to change together in order to get where we want to go together. And of course, as a customer, we're always very picky of, like, you need to be a great partner for us. We need to be a great customer, because if we are not a great customer, then we only build flat and sterile interaction with vendors, and that's not necessarily my style. So I don't love the transactional part of, like, I get a service and I give you money. It's more about, this is a problem, can you help me fix it? And now, when I talk about partnership, of course, one of the most important things is selecting the right partner. So when you go into the selection, you need to understand the experience, the knowledge, the openness, the transparency, having a lot of conversation with the people that you're working with, a lot of understanding of are you really the right fit for my service, and of course, again, make sure that together with the understanding, there is this constant and continuous transparency and communication with each other, because without that, I think that you're already setting yourself up for fail.
To add to what Tommaso was saying, like, we try to always remain competitive in the landscape. Our customers can be up and running with our solution really in a matter of days, not weeks, because we do a lot of work on domain adaptation, but we don't do any engine training per se, because engine training tends to be costly and quite time-consuming. Another factor for us is being secure, right? And we have talked about it a few times, because it's very important for our customers that we have this strict no content trace policy. We also try to always be flexible with our customers' needs. So we try to integrate new features into our roadmap based on what's coming ahead and what our customers need. We grow our infrastructure as our customers grow, and we have a simple and transparent pricing. And of course, being in this domain of customer support, we are a very customer-centric organization, and we know our customer support needs to be very fast and very reliable, because all of our customers are always active around the globe at any time.
And I think we're running a bit out of time, so let me fast forward a little bit on the takeaway. First of all, we obviously, this was a very successful proof of concept that led us in the last 5 years to expand the scope. We expanded the chat support not only to the partner but to the customer, and then we expanded on all languages. We increased the number of agents, we trained them, we select them properly. So we really spread this multilingual support across the business. And of course, thanks to Language.io, we are starting now to experiment with new technology, with AI, to try to understand how that can help us. AI cannot replace chat. It could potentially replace virtual agent, but not chat yet. But we'll see what happens in the future. And I wanted to jump on the conclusion and the takeaways in order to understand what we really learned from this partnership.
Yeah, definitely. So if your organization is thinking about embarking on this journey, or exciting journey, let me say, of multilingual customer support, there's a few tips that both Tommaso and I will like to share with you. So for me, the first tip will be to share your goals and your expectations with your partners, right? Let them know how their expertise is going to fit within your organization, and make sure you are transparent about what your goals are. The second goal, or the second tip that I will have, is to always be transparent with your end customers about the use of a fully automated machine translation technology, right? You are providing MT because you want to be available for your customers in any language, and ideally you want to be 24/7, and to achieve that, you're using this approach, and Expedia is always transparent about that, and I think that makes the communication a lot easier. The other important point is to always make sure you don't forget about your agents, right? Make sure you make them part of this process, because they will need to understand the changes that are coming ahead, how do they fit in this landscape. They need to get training not only on the new machine translation component in their CRM platforms, but they also need to be aware about how they need to write right with machine translation in mind. And last but not least, just leverage, your assets that you already have in your organizations, like your glossaries, your style guides, any other information that could be useful, because that can be adapted for the chat and ticket use case.
Correct. And so on the customer side, of course, the takeaways, the learning that we got is prepare your resources, select your agents, train them, make sure that they understand how they need to handle this new solution, this new communication channel, and select your partner, grow the partnership with them, try to really invest the resources and energy and time to bring them along in the journey more than let them run on their own. And then eventually identify success. If you identify your metrics, you identify your KPIs, it's going to be much easier to wrap and frame the program and make sure that it hits the ground as it should. So this story is a story about technology, it's about multilingual support, it's about partnership, as it's about mutual benefits. And I hope somehow we share something useful with you. Thank you.